Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Upgrades. I'm Jeremy Knoll.
And I'm John Suarez.
And in this episode, we're going to be going over the Lorehold Legacies deck from Commander 2021, featuring Osgir, the Reconstructor, as the commander. Now, for our most recent episode of Commander Versus, if you watched it hopefully this week when this comes out, we actually played with 4 of the precons from Commander 2021, and John actually played the Lorehold Legacies deck. So, after that game, how did you feel about it out of the box, John?
I felt like I was a little mana screwed at the beginning of the game. That tends to happen sometimes, though. And I was kind of upset that the Prismari deck that we covered in our preview video had better mana rocks and better artifact mana than the red-white artifact deck. That kind of bothered me.
Right.
I was a big fan of that. But there's some really powerful decks in this pre-constructed deck. Osgir is really, really cool. The other face card, Alabu, I believe it is. That card is really, really sweet. And this deck has some, it has some pretty good cards. I'm pretty excited to get some better cards right now.
Yeah, honestly, if we could do an upgrades video on Alabu Ancient Witness, I think it would be very cool. It's such a neat card.
It is.
It's a very unique ability. I'm excited to see people's takes on that deck for sure. So for our upgrades video, let's start off with your first couple. Since you said you actually were a little upset at the mana, let's talk about your first couple of cards here that you're upgrading.
Yeah, so the first two I'm going to go with. The first one is going to be Wayfarer's Bauble. Great artifact from, I believe, 5th Dawn originally. 1 mana, pay 2, tap sack, go get a land. So it's kind of like your colorless Rampant Growth. Now with Osgir, you're going to be able to, bring that card back in a token form, or 2x token form, pretty early on in the game. And, you're going to be able to ramp pretty good, which is great for this kind of a deck. You don't get that option very often, so...
Yeah.
And the next one isn't really a mana rock, but it's still a really cool card with this deck and with Osgir, and that's Lotus Bloom. Normally uncastable. You normally have to pay 0 to suspend it for 3 turns. And then after that, you get a Black Lotus. But this deck has different ways of putting it in the graveyard via like Thrill of Possibility and other things. So there's going to be some chances where Osgir just gets to, make 2 Black Lotus tokens, which is pretty obnoxious.
Yeah, it's really like after we looked at each other's lists, one thing, this is the first time I think that since we've been doing upgrades together, that we shared each other's list and realized that we didn't have any cards in common for ones that we would put in. And I looked at your cards and I'm like, oh man, that's super obvious. I don't know why I didn't think of that, and Wayfarer's Bauble was definitely one of them. So
yeah.
My first one is one that I actually really, really like, and it's a cousin to one that I actually advocate for people to play, and that's Rift Sweeper is the other one, and that's Pull from Eternity. So it's a 1 mana instant, put target exiled card into its owner's graveyard. So it's face up exiled, but works really well with Osgir's second ability. You put something, exile something to get 2 tokens of it, and then you immediately put it back into your graveyard. You can exile again to get 2 more tokens of it, the next turn or whatever.
Yeah.
Just very solid. I try and advocate for Rift Sweeper in pretty much all your green decks because somebody's going to exile something that you really want to have. They're going to Bajuka Bug you. They're going to do something like that. Easy way to get it, put it back into your library, go search it out later. This one, even more synergistic with the commander. So,
For sure. Sweet card.
Yeah, another one that, like, again, when I said when we looked at each other's and I was like, oh man, that was really obvious to me, was one that's in yours that I immediately thought, this is a red commander precon. Obviously, it has this card.
It does not. It does not have Blasphemous I feel like most of the red pre-constructed decks have had Blasphemous, but not this one.
They've been in a decent amount, and that's why it just completely... Oh yeah, it has it. Like, obviously, why would I put it in here? So,
yeah, great card. Very cheap now because it's been reprinted a couple of times, which is great because the card was expensive at one point. So, nice little 1 mana Wrath most of the time. So, big fan of that card.
My next 2 cards are actually similar to what I was saying with trying to get things back. There's already Scrap Trawler in the deck, but I'm also suggesting putting in Mirror Retriever and Junk Diver. They're basically the same card. Mirror Retriever costs 1 less, 2 mana. Junk Diver costs 3 but has flying, but they both, when they die, return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. I think it works really well with this deck, especially if you're not able to abuse Osgir's second ability and exile them all. So if you really just want to get them back, great way to do it. There's ways to sacrifice creatures and artifacts, so it's just a great way to get those cards back out of the graveyard.
For sure. And speaking of getting things back out of the graveyard, my next card is actually Goblin Engineer. So this is colorless and a red, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for an artifact and put it into your graveyard, which is pretty good because that's normally where you want your artifacts in this deck. And then you can pay a red, tap it, sack an artifact, and return an artifact with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So like I was saying earlier, with Lotus Bloom, you can do some obnoxious things with Lotus Bloom and Goblin Engineer. You can also go get a big artifact if you happen to want that for whatever reason. If it's not the Goblin Engineer that you're needing to activate, if it's Osgir or whatever the scenario may be, it's kind of like a nice little tutor.
Yeah, it's a great way to get that card right into your graveyard and be able to just use that immediately. So my next one is another one that I think should be in pretty much most artifact-based decks, and that's Foundry Inspector. 3 mana, 3/2 artifact you control or artifact spells you cast cost 1 less. It's pretty. I think that one's kind of obvious, but I think that it's been reprinted a bunch. It's super cheap. Grab it, put it in the deck. It'll be great.
Yeah, it's an artifact medallion.
Not much else. Not much else you can say about it.
So my next card is one of my favorite cards. I like vintage, obviously, so I play a lot of these kind of random cards that you don't normally see in Commander, and that's Kadoltha Forgemaster. 5 mana, tap, sacrifice 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact, and put it into play. It's a 3/5 as well if you happen to need to block or attack, but that doesn't happen very often with this kind of a card. This just, you sack your 3 worst artifacts or your cheapest artifacts for Osgir, and then you go get your giant artifact to put it into play. So this card just gets your best card normally and instantly puts it into the battlefield.
Yeah. And in a similar vein, I also have a couple cards that will allow you to sacrifice things. I have 2 that I wanted to make sure that we had the ability to sacrifice at instant speed without a cost associated with it. And that's Slowbad Goblin Tinkerer, which is a 1/2 for 1 and a red, legendary creature, goblin, sack an artifact, target artifact gains indestructible until end of turn. So it's really relevant in this deck.
Yeah,
can help card. Can help save something. Can also just sack, one of the like Wellsprings or something like that, to put it into your graveyard and save one of your other big ones. The second one is a card that I recently picked up for my Tashar deck because it works really well in there, and that's Thermal Navigator. It's a 2/2 for 3 mana, artifact creature, sack an artifact, it gains flying until end of turn. The ability less relevant, doesn't really matter that it gains flying, but it's a free way to sacrifice an artifact. It is a 3 mana in Tashar. It's really great because it's another 3 mana creature, can come back. This one, just another really great way to sacrifice like your Wellsprings and things like that you want to get tokens of kind of early on. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So my next card is a companion, but we won't be playing it that way. We'll just be playing it in the normal way.
I really like this one.
The Dawnwaker. So it's a 3 mana 3/3 that makes the abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. So Osgir costs 2 less to activate immediately, which is awesome. And the effect can't reduce the mana to less than 1, so you're always going to be paying at least 1. It also has a random other ability to tacked on that's just pay 1, target creature can't block this turn. So if you happen to, just get someone that way, that's pretty cool. But that's not what we're there. What's not what the card's for. The card is for making sure we don't have to pay as much mana into our cards, which is great.
Yeah, a little less relevant, but could still get somebody. You never quite know. But yeah, the being able to reduce, abilities by 2 is great, and I really like that you put that one in there. So one card that, since we were talking about sacrificing and things like that I really like for this deck, and normally it's one that I would actually take out of certain other precons, is Spine of Ishsa. And it's an artifact for 7. When it enters the battlefield, it has destroy target permanent, and then if it's ever put into a graveyard, you just get to put it right back into your hand. So you don't get to abuse it with Osgir unless you want to do it, as the triggers on the sack or whatever. But it's still just another good, repeatable way to be able to get rid of problematic permanents on the board.
Yep. And you can abuse it with Kadoltha Forgemaster.
You can definitely abuse it with Kadoltha Forgemaster. Little synergy going on there.
Those two are friends.
Yeah, they are.
All right.
What's your next one here?
So my next one is Illusionist Bracers. 2-mana artifact equipment. Whenever an ability of an equipped creature is activated, if it's a mana ability, or if it's not a mana ability, you can copy it and choose new targets for it, and equips as well. So this is, the original version of this card. There is actually a new card in this deck called Battle Mage's Bracers. That's very, very similar. It's 2 colors and a red, and it gives your equipped creature haste. And then basically the same thing as Illusionist Bracers, except that you have to pay 1 in order to get the copy. But that's still very reasonable, especially since it's, it also gives your creatures haste, which is pretty obnoxious. So I think having both bracers is really going to be good for this deck. You can only wear so many bracers.
One on each arm. There you go.
Well, yeah, exactly. It shows 2 for each, but that's fine. We can make it work.
It is pluralized bracers. So I guess.
Yeah, so each is
a set. Yeah. You just wear them one over the other and call it good. Yeah, I really like Illusionist Bracers. It was in my Tasker deck for a really long time. I think it's a great card for any commander that has an activated ability that you can abuse. So my next card is one that I know that some people don't like giving their opponents the extra value, but is one that I really like, and that's Winds of Abandon. And it allows you to overload for 6 mana to exile all creatures you don't control. It is targeted, 1 and a white, exile target creature, but overload for 6. Really great way to get rid of a lot of problematic creatures that are on the board. And if you've got anybody who's really starting to build up an army, just wipe them all out. And if they have any sort of recursion, it kind of gets around that. So, it's really cheap. It's surprisingly inexpensive for the effect, and I'm surprised that it's as cheap as it is right now.
It's probably cheaper than a Path to Exile.
Yeah.
So my last card is another artifact, and that is Sandstone Oracle. 7 mana, 4/4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you choose an opponent, and if that player has more cards in hand than you, which they will, because otherwise you wouldn't choose them, you draw cards equal to the difference. In the past, we've actually cut this card from some of our commander decks, but I think in this one, where you get to abuse artifacts and recur them, or just get different abilities, I think this card's going to be very, very good. You need ways to draw cards in red and white without spending hundreds of dollars on things like Wheel of Fortune, and I think this is just a really good way of doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the ability to be able to do it and get 2 copies of it later if you need to, and just be, whenever is really nice in this deck for sure.
Or just recur it with your guys that you put in Mirror Retriever and stuff.
Yeah, Mirror Retriever, Junk Diver, stuff like that.
Yep.
So my last 2 are actually going to be lands, and I think both of these are. I think one of them is really good in basically any artifact deck you're running. That's Inventor's Fair. It's a legendary land. If you control 3 or more artifacts at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain a life, which is okay, but not really what you're doing with the card. It's kind of incremental life gain if you need it. But the main thing is it allows you to pay 4 and sacrifice it to search for an artifact, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And only if you have 3 or more artifacts. But it's a really great way to go get something that you want to cast. Like you have the Goblin Engineer that just puts it right into your graveyard. If you actually want to make sure you're casting it the first time and playing it, then it's a great way. The second card is Bonder's Enclave. I debated on putting War Room in a lot of these decks, and I think for this deck specifically, it's really good to have Bonder's Enclave because it says activate this ability only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Your commander's 4 works really well. You don't have to pay the extra 2 life. You're still just paying the 3, drawing a card. There you go. As you said, it is difficult to kind of make sure you're getting that extra card advantage of drawing those extra cards in red and white. This is a great way with your commander out.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next thing we're going to go over is just a couple of cards that we would cut from the deck. And again, cutting cards is, a personal preference, and it's just what do you think is cool? What do you like? What do you don't like? And it's really up to you. One that we definitely both heavily suggest you cut, though, is Study Hall.
Yep, get it out.
I don't think it's great.
No studying.
No, it's... Yeah, we kind of talked about this in the Prismari Performance deck, and I was like, I said, I guess you can, if you're making like a college-themed deck, or if you're making like a book-themed deck, or something like that, it works well, but for the most part, there's just better options
Yes,
than scrying a couple extra, you know?
Yep.
So that it's basically like it was a Bonder's Ornament last year, right? That was the one that we all just kind of agreed, you know, just kind of get
it out. Yeah,
get it
that's
out.
the first thing
So,
to do. I think we also
one,
cut a couple, right? We both cut like Boros, Lock, and Unstable Obelisk.
Yeah.
You know, those are both cards you could abuse in some form with Osgir, but the 7 mana for Unstable Obelisk is just a lot.
Yeah.
And there's better ways, you know, of getting a little incremental draw from in the deck other than Boros Locket, because that also costs a lot to do. So
yeah, and like you said, it's kind of disappointing that, you know, like the Prismari deck had better mana rocks.
Yeah,
if you wanted to put.
Yeah, I get what they're doing here because you got to sacrifice it and reuse it, but it's just not very good. So just give me the better mana rock.
Yeah, for sure. The other one was Triplicate Titan.
Yes.
This one's pretty on the line to me. Like, it's just a big dumb cool card.
Yeah, but I'm not a 9 mana guy.
With an artifact themed deck, you're generally trying to stay a little bit closer to the ground. You're generally trying to, you know, abuse that Osgir ability and, you know, play a couple extra cards on your turn. And this is going to take up your whole turn, either if it's going to be playing it the first time or if it's going to be using Osgir's ability, because it's just so much mana.
Yeah, too much mana.
So
I also cut Jorkadine. Don't get fooled by that card. Just take it out of your deck.
Yeah, that one's
plenty of other options.
Bad. Yeah, and I know my last one is pretty controversial to you, at least.
It sure is.
I personally don't like Bosch Iron Golem that much, so I would say cut it. But again, personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
That's
don't
just
do
me.
It. It's Bosch. Respect. Put respect on his name, Jeremy.
I mean, that's one of the great things about Commander is, you know, you can have your own opinion, build your deck your own way, and play it how you like. And I would rather not play the Bosch. You love it, so we could both, you know, play how we want to play. So thank you so much. That is the Lorehold Legacies deck for Commander 2021. Make sure to let us know what cards you would add to the deck in the comments below. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jeremy Knoll for Jonathan Suarez. Thanks for watching.